Portable TV. Come watch with me. Months after announcing new sanctions against officials in Syria, the Trump administration could be poised to take more action against the Syrian government in the coming weeks. But officials from both Syria and Russia are openly warning that if the U.S. adds more sanctions to that list, it will continue to have a devastating impact on the Syrian people. RT's Rachel Blevins has been following the story. She's joining us now. So, Rachel, could we see new sanctions before Trump leaves office?
We could, and the State Department is already warning that will be the case. And we heard from the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, who testified before Congress that measures are already being planned right now, and they are set to be announced before Biden takes office. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Your question of will there be additional designations under the Caesar Act between now and January 20th? I can't specify specifically what sanctions we'll do in the coming weeks, but we are intending to do some.
Now, these sanctions are part of the Syria Civilian Protection Act, which President Trump signed into law last year, and its goal is to push for the U.S. to enact sanctions against anyone they feel is supporting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Well, what do we know so far about that legislation? What has it accomplished? Because clearly the envoy doesn't have any answers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this legislation was officially enacted back in June, and then the Trump administration announced another round of sanctions in September. And it's interesting here that it's called the Civilian Protection Act, and it specifically says that the goal is not to harm the Syrian people, because we heard from the foreign minister for Russia, and he said that that is exactly what the U.S. is doing with these measures right now. Take a listen to what he said earlier.
Solving problems about the country's socio-economic development, solving issues met by the Syrian people in the COVID-19 situation are hindered by criminal unilateral sanctions, which have been imposed on Syria by the United States and some of their allies.
Now, both Russia and Syria have argued that these sanctions are illegal under international law and that they are aiding the destruction of Syria overall. And we also heard from Syria's foreign minister earlier. Take a listen to what he had to say.
When we see the United States steals our oil, occupies our territories, supports non-national movements, when they illegally enter our territories, disrespecting our sovereignty, all this contradicts the United Nations organization's resolutions. And this doesn't aim to the restoration of Syria. On the contrary, this aims to the destruction of Syria.
Now, the United Nations has yet to acknowledge these claims, but it has been quick to blame the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Syria directly on the Syrian government.
So how could an incoming Biden administration impact these already current and existing tensions?
Well, it's interesting because the ultimate goal of the legislation that President Trump signed into power was to overthrow President Assad in Syria. And that's something that the Obama administration tried to accomplish. And of course, Biden was a very big part of that administration, and he was a big supporter of their program in which they were arming and training what they referred to as moderate rebels. Now, we now know that that program was a disaster, but it's created a lot of concerns and speculation for exactly what Biden's policy would look like in Syria, and if his administration would go so far to try to overthrow Assad that they would end up in a direct conflict with Russia.
Yeah, we have no idea where they're going to go because we know the Biden administration hasn't said hardly anything about foreign policy. Rachel Blevins, thank you for that.
Thank you.